following podcast is for informational purposes only. The contents of this podcast do not constitute tax, legal, or investment advice. Take responsibility for your own decisions, consult with the proper professionals, and do your own research.
This is also the reason why I joined the crypto space. DeFi is always providing a more open and permissionless opportunity for the retail users.
GRTiQ podcast.
We are like astronauts floating in the space of time. Just between past and future.
Welcome to the GRTiQ podcast. Today, I'm speaking with Meina Zhou, co-founder and CEO at Native, an innovative DeFi solution for Web3 that combines bridges, assets, and pricing into one offering. This interview with Meina was a lot of fun. She's a brilliant entrepreneur with a fun story to share. During our conversation, Meina discusses her upbringing in Shanghai, moving to the United States for university, her successful career in consulting, and then her entrepreneurial journey that led to the launch of Native. Throughout our discussion, Meina offers profound insights into DeFi, crypto, and the future of the industry. I started the conversation with Meina by asking her about what it was like growing up in Shanghai.
I think there are several core things that contribute to my childhood. First of all, because both my parents are business people, I always growing up under their influence. They will teach me how to negotiate, how to influence other people. And their education has always focused a lot more on problem-solving skills instead of academic achievements. And especially in a city, a big modern city like Shanghai, you do get a lot more opportunities than a childhood comparing to a countryside. When you grow up in countryside, the experience will be you hang out with your friend, you go hiking or more close to the natural things. But for me, it's almost like, I always go to dinners with my parents for different business engagements, or I get to do some really interesting extracurricular that are more related to the business side of things.
What types of things were you interested in as a kid? Any hobbies or special interests that you had?
So there are two routes of things I would do. One route is what my parents, they will try to inspire me to do. So they are always open for me to learn different things like piano, a traditional instrument, pipa. They will also take me to classes like calligraphy. Those are very traditional Chinese culture that they want me to get influenced by. But from my side, actually, I always like the other side of the world. I like video games. I like surfing the internet. I still remember back in early 90s, right? And in China, you actually have to call a certain number to get on internet. And you have like those different chat rooms. So I was a little girl who was like 6 or 7 years old, and I get into those like random chat rooms, and there will be like random dudes. They will ask you, okay, I don't want to say sexual question, but they will ask you some few questions to adults. And then I would tell my dad, okay, they asked me this question. What does that mean? And then my dad will give me like a random answer to that. So I was always like trying to explore the human connections or new things on the internet. I do remember there was 1 month, my dad was like, you need to stop being on the internet because the phone bill has increased like by this amount, by 500% or 600%.
That's amazing. So what's the story then from how you go from Shanghai to the United States?
So I went to a high school affiliated to Fudan University, which was, I think, the top 3 high school in China. And then the majority of the students, graduates, usually go to Fudan University, which is also the top 3 university in China. But then there are also a large proportion of graduates who will go overseas to study abroad. So I literally want to go abroad when I was in my second year of high school because there were a lot of exchange programs. I have heard a lot of great feedback from the graduates. But at that time, I had a mature discussion with my parents. I was like, I really want to go overseas to spend a year as an exchange student, but they're worried about, oh, what if you're not safe? What if you cannot overcome all those like challenges? They say, how about you wait a year, right? Thought through your decision. And if during the year you tell me, okay, this is really your decision, then we will support you to go study abroad for your undergraduate. So half a year later, then I made the decision. I said, oh, yes, I really want to explore the world. I think I study in China. I stay in China. Yes, I will be going to a very good university, studying still the subjects I like, but I don't think I will get the experience, opportunity to the culture perspective to really to broaden my mind in that sense. So then I decided to apply to the universities in the States.
And you ended up landing at Agnes Scott's College in Georgia. So how did you find that college and what was the appeal of going to Atlanta?
It was actually very random. So in China, you have different institutions who can help you to apply for the universities in the United States. And they will give you a recommendation list of the schools, depends on what your interests are, what are the majors that you are interested in learning. The way I discovered Agnes Scott College is actually one of the previous class, an older sister, she attended Agnes Scott and she really gave like a thumbs up and recommendation for that. So the advisor actually helped her to apply to Agnes Scott. And then they introduced this like women's college to me. There's also some misunderstanding of women's college from my parents' perspective, because they think like if you go to women's college, they will teach you how to become a proper lady, those kind of things. And I don't want to say it's the exact opposite, but I think the women's college, the liberal arts study usually is more teaching you on how to become like independent women, which now I think back, it's a good misunderstanding from my perspective, because I definitely have the strengths and I had the opportunity to explore myself at Agnes Scott College.
That's a funny misunderstanding of the nature of a women's college, but it did, as you say, work out for you. So let's talk about that experience of going from China to the United States. Was there culture shock there? Was that a difficult experience for you to kind of adjust and go to work as a university student in the US?
I think culture shock was okay, because that was when I was 18, right? I was kind of very brave and I was interested in almost everything. And coming to the United States is just a completely whole new experience for me. And because I was also very outgoing at that time, I was trying to chat with everybody around me, participating as many extracurricular as possible. But I guess the challenge I faced is at the first several years, I really wasn't used to all the food in the United States. So I experienced a period of where I find nothing is good. So I lose a lot of weight. But after a while, I start to enjoy all the Southern fried chicken and waffles and biscuits. And I gained 10 pounds within one semester. I think everything went pretty smoothly. The most special part is definitely, it's not only a women's college, but also a liberal arts college. So I'm definitely learning a lot of interesting things. So my major was mathematics. So I did a lot of deep research in mathematics, in abstract algebra. But I also got to do a lot of interesting classes, such as public speaking, such as Broadway shows, filming, marketing. So I think it's because of the very balanced courses I was taking. So actually it broadened my way of thinking. I used to be very, very logical because I like mathematics, but I do realize that like your brain kind of functions better when you have both the logical and emotional components infused together.
After Agnes Scott College, you end up in New York. You go to New York University and you study a master's in data science. So let's talk about that then. How did you go from studying abroad in Atlanta and then deciding I'm going to go even a step further and get a master's degree in New York?
Okay, and that's another random story. Now I look back, I think my life is all like random stories or decisions, because I graduated from my undergraduate actually within 3 years. I did double major in mathematics and economics, and I was able to graduate within 2.5 years because I was able to finish all the courses. But the college asks you to stay there for 3 years. So I stayed there for 3 years. And then I originally wanted to obtain a math PhD. As I told you, I was doing abstract algebra research with my mathematics professor. I was able to identify a small theory. I presented across the different mathematics conference across the country. So all the professors, the mathematics department, they have like high hopes on me, pursuing like a lifelong PhD, like mathematics pure career, right? But when I told my parents my decision of pursuing a PhD, they were like, no. Again, they have a misunderstanding of PhD, like a female PhD, because they are afraid, okay, if you pursue a PhD as a female, it will be harder for you to later like get married or those sort of things. It's a very Asian thoughts. And they say, if you're going to pursue the math PhD, don't ever come back. Why don't you pursue like a master degree in a bigger city so that like you can actually get into more practical fields? Mainly they are concerned. And I thought about it. Do I want to spend my life, my next 3 to 5 years in a lab every day, just like very hardcore thinking about mathematical problem? Or do I actually want to go back to the modern city where I used to grow up and then find some practical things to do? Then I picked the latter one. I actually applied mainly for financial engineering programs. I got the interview from MIT for their Master of Finance program. But another story happened is the night I was going to fly out from Atlanta to Boston for the MIT in-person interview. Atlanta snowed. It never snowed, but it was snowing. So my flight was delayed and then I was wrecked. I stayed at the airport for the full night. And then the next day when I arrived and I took the interview, of course, I didn't do really well. So NYU Data Science is actually the only data science program I applied for. But then I decided, okay, I will go for the Master of Data Science program. And it turns out to be a great choice.
So at this point in your life, then, based on some of the prompts from your parents and the way you're thinking about your life and your career, you decide to do data science. There's some practical utility to it. You get a master's degree in it instead of going full forward on a PhD. Do you have at this point in your life a vision for kind of what you want to do with your career? Are you going to stay in the United States? Do you plan to go home? How are you thinking through those things?
The current point of life, I know I enjoy building 100%. I enjoy building companies, building products. So I will continue to build the current company. But in terms of academics, actually, now I think back, I do want to get a PhD, not necessarily in mathematics, but I think like in the future, maybe like once I settle down more on the company side, right? When the management or when the company grow to a certain period, and when I have more time, then I can actually pursue a PhD, for example, in psychology, in some potential areas that I'm really interested in. So I do think it's very valuable to obtain like a PhD, not in the sense that to get the degree. It's actually you are surrounded by the world's most deepest expertise in that specific subject matter. And then you dedicated your life, right? 3 to 5 years of your life to immerse yourself into that area and try to become an expert. I do think it's very meaningful.
What was it like living in New York? Was that another adjustment? New York's a big city. There's a lot of action there. Was that difficult?
No, New York was not difficult at all because it's very, very similar to Shanghai where I grew up. Actually, when I moved to Atlanta, it was an adjustment because Atlanta is a big city, but compared to New York to Shanghai, it's still fairly. It's not smaller, but it's the speed of the city is not that fast, right? You can still consider it as a rural city. So I'm going to be very careful in terms of the words or description I use here, but you get my point. But I do get to enjoy the slowness of life a little bit more when I'm in Atlanta, especially when I was learning mathematics, when I was learning Broadway shows, filming. I go to the same yogurt place every Friday afternoon to enjoy life, right? You get sunshine weather all year round. I never owned a winter jacket at all. And everybody was friendly. They would talk to you, saying hello to you on the street. While versus in New York or in Shanghai, right? Even people bump you into the street, they wouldn't say sorry. They would just walk by very quickly. So I'm very used to the New York City type of life. And it was kind of very familiar for me when I come from Atlanta to New York, because it's almost like, okay, Meina, you enjoy 3 years of very relaxed life. Now put you back into reality, work really hard on your studies, find something practical to do.
The GRTiQ podcast is made possible by a generous grant from the Graph Foundation. The Graph Grants program provides support for protocol infrastructure, tooling, dApps, subgraphs, and community building efforts. Learn more at thegraph.foundation. That's thegraph.foundation.
Hi, this is GRTiQ, and thank you for listening. Listeners who enjoy this content can help support the GRTiQ podcast by leaving a review or a 5-star rating wherever they download podcasts, by sharing episodes on social media, or by simply telling a friend or colleague about something they heard or learned from one of our guests. It's support from listeners like you that make it possible for us to keep shining a light on the people and stories behind Web3 and the graph. Okay, so grow up in Shanghai, China, decide to study abroad, end up at Agnes College in Atlanta, and then pursue a master's degree at NYU in data science. After you complete that master's degree, what do you decide to do after university? How do you get to work?
So naturally, I applied for a lot of data science intern positions as well as data science positions. And I applied for many bigger companies or small startups. My personality is at that time, I always do everything at the very last minute. But I was very lucky to get into Bitly, where I interned, and then they also offered me a full-time position right before I graduated from graduate school. And I think my approach of like finding jobs was definitely different from all of my classmates. All of my classmates, they're very organized and well prepared for all the interview process. But for most of my job opportunities, it always comes from my connections, my social networks. Meaning like for the Billy one, I applied very last minute, but I showed up to the interview with a poster that I created because it was in person. So I was able to impress them with my personality on one day with 5 interviews, and they decided to hire me like the same day. Then I become the second hire of like data scientist at Bitly. I was able to work out a lot of business problems because when I joined, I do realize that they were lacking a lot of analysis in terms of the business management side. So I told them, okay, I really want to focus on the business management side of things. And they said, okay, go ahead and explore. So I will literally like have meetings with the salesperson, with the marketing team there, asking them what kind of data is available at Bitly, right? I will also ask the product team, okay, if it's all the clicks data, like what are the metrics are we tracking and how can we help the business team to do more upsell or churn analysis? So I always maintain that business goal in my mind. And after I worked at Bitly for 2 years, I decided, I wanted to work on a more diversified set of problems. So I started to apply for more consulting firms. I joined Capco, which is a very specific financial services consulting. I was basically leading the wealth management analytics team. Yeah, I know it sounds weird. After graduating for 2 years, I started to lead teams. But I think it was all very wonderful opportunities because at that time, data science think about it, it's very new. And I am this young, determined lady who is very outspoken and who is very opinionated and stubborn in my own way of thinking. So whenever I go into a room, right, it will be a lot of like middle-aged financial guys. And then I would say, no, this is not the right way to do data science. You guys know nothing about data science. And I start to say A, B, C, D, E. And because it's new concepts. So it's almost very hard for them to say, no, what you're saying is wrong. So that has been the early years of all my career. I was always jumping from different consulting firms. Either I will deploy my whole team, right? I will pull the different resources from the consulting firm and then work for the client, or the client, they will already have a team and they will ask me to help them to manage their team or hire more people, work with their like global team. Or they will just say, okay, can you be this one person hire, like special consultant where you develop all the architecture of this, right? From the ideation to architecture. And we only want the phase one of the architecture. If this is really, really good, then they will decide to hire. So it's all like different engagements. But I was able to work with many different banks, financial institutions, different industry because of those opportunities. And I was also like always going around the world to pitch the world how I do data science. So I will still be the youngest, probably the one of the rare females to present at those conferences. But it's all a great experience.
Why weren't you intimidated, or where did this confidence come from, kind of stepping into these roles and being in rooms where you might have been the only woman working on these problems? How did you do that?
I think it's what you call double sword. Because on one side, yes, of course, in my mind, I'm a little bit intimidated because I'm the minority. But on the other side is like, because you are the minority, so they actually want to hear more of your opinion, right? This sounds very wrong, but this is how the real world works. And you kind of need to tweak it to work in your own way. Because as soon as I realized, actually they really need some female presenters to present at those conferences, then I start to apply to more conferences. But of course, their selection is not because based on you are the female, it's based on what you do. And I just think if me as a female, like with technical background, can get more exposure, then I would totally leverage that. But on the other side, I do have a lot of things I need to catch up. Because I still remember the first day where I joined the consulting firm. And because of my salary, my title day one was like senior consultant or something like that. But my boss, the partner at that time, he pulled me into the room. He was like, Meina, your title is senior consultant, not because of your knowledge in consulting. It's just because of your salary. You may know a lot in data science, but you know nothing about consulting. So now let me teach you what is consulting 101. Yeah, he was a really, really great mentor. But see, that's how my experience has been. And I was really honored. Like I always have great mentors who will bootstrap my growth. I was lacking managerial skill set. I was lacking the client relationship management skill set, but people were always just supporting me in that sense.
So if you look back on this time at Bitly, and then of course this time in consulting, what did it teach you about the nature of business and teams?
I think really all the experience with the startups, with the consulting firms, mainly first is the communication skills, right? I get to speak at a lot of different conferences. I have to work with many diversified background of people, from the super high level managing directors at super large international banks to like the actual teams who will be working on those specific problems. And I need to manage them from an outsider perspective. Those are actually taking a lot of time for me to learn how to communicate effectively. Second is naturally, I was able to cultivate my skill set of reading people. I can quickly grasp the strengths and the weakness of different team members and put them together. I think this paves a really, really good foundation for me hiring my own team or building my own company. And then I think it's also because of my natural curiosity of different business problems. So I was always able to stick to the very core fundamental, right? Instead of staying more on the research side of things, I was always thinking, okay, what's the most effective way, or what will be the most effective analysis that I could do right now that's feasible to improve the business, to have like an actual outcome. So those are the three core things I really learned through my consulting phase of career.
Amazing. I love that list, and I appreciate you sharing that. So let's then again go back in time a little bit here. So tell us when you first became aware of crypto, the industry, Web3, everything that was happening, and what were your first impressions?
My story always revolves around people. The first time I know crypto, it was, I think, at the end of 2021, where I had a dinner. I went to like a friend's dinner where they also invited a bunch of people from the crypto industry. So we were just having random conversation about technology, about crypto. And that was actually the first time I learned the concept of Bitcoin or Ethereum. And all of a sudden I find it very amazing. But of course, at that time, it was more because they say, oh, this is a good investment opportunity. You should look into that. So on the very specific night, I bought my first Bitcoin and Ethereum. I also bought Ethereum because I was aping in. I believe, oh, this is great technology. And plus, I think during the consulting firm times, like we do have a small practice where like there's a blockchain expert. But now I look back, I don't think we know anything about the industry. It's just more like a specific practice they want to have at the firm. But coming back to the story, that's literally how I learned the industry. Is I met with industry leaders within crypto. They taught me about the fundamentals. And since then, I started to gather more knowledge about the industry.
How would you explain to somebody what drew your interest? I mean, from an outsider's perspective, you're on a clear career path. You're having a lot of success. There's no reason for you to get interested in other things, especially these things like crypto. So how do you explain where that interest came from?
It's the freedom it's providing to people. It sounds very cliche, but really like deeper in my mind, because I've worked with many financial institutions or big companies, especially those big international banks. Yes, I was doing a lot of innovative data science stuffs, but if you really look at their technology, right, the database or whatever analysis they are using internally is not that advanced. So the traditional finance industry is always moving in a very slow pace. And I still remember I always have a weekly meeting with this managing director at a super large international bank, and whatever, I will always propose new ideas to him. I would say, okay, this is a new way we should upsell the client, downsell the client. This is the whole roadmap of the analysis I'm going to do. But then he will say, Meina, I think those are all great ideas, but it will be very hard to adopt it. Like, even though I already proved the testing data, the results, right? To get all the board approved and then to get all the, like, let's say wealth managers to use those tools, it takes a long time. So they're moving a little bit slower than I was envisioning. So another thing is like all the KYC, right? You need to do with the banks and the consumer experience. It's very gated, I would say. You have very specific criteria of segmenting those clients within the international banks, and people are just serving those specific clienteles based on their wealth level, which, I mean, yes, makes sense because they only have limited resources. But if you think about, okay, how do we have a more healthier financial market? I do think we need more open, permissionless protocols that are going to serve to the general public. And the reality is, because crypto or Web3 industry is so new, then a lot of people, they don't even realize that they have those choices available. And I was aping because I was like, okay, this is very cool. I get to know this cool new industry, the new like DeFi industry, and I get to participate. And naturally, I think, oh, this might be something I want to work on in the long term.
So what did you do next? You got interested, as you said, you kind of aped in 2021 at a friend's dinner. You bought your first Bitcoin. You bought your first Ethereum. How did you get active and start sort of participating in the industry?
I didn't act upon anything other than buying or aping until the middle of 2022 when I started my podcast channel. Right before that, I was just trying to make more connections, talking to people in the industry, try to understand the industry a little bit better. And then I thought to myself, what's my own strengths, or what can I do to bootstrap my growth? Based on my experience, you can see I'm always trying to find like a fast path, like a very fast path to break into some kind of like industry. And I came up with this idea. If I am very talkative, if I'm very good at like talking to people, understand people, why don't I start my own podcast channel, right? First, I get to meet with more successful founders, investors, artists. And second, I get to learn their story. And in the same time, I will be able to brainstorm on my own idea. If I don't have the idea yet, I don't want to force it, because that's a core drive for you to build a business, right? You want to build something that you are passionate. So I started from the podcast.
And the podcast is called Crypto Meina Podcast. And tell us about that experience then. So you decided to start you leveraged your strengths. What did you learn about the industry by virtue of doing that podcast?
I didn't count how many people I interviewed. I think it was around 15 to 20 people at least. And I did a lot of different forms, right? Mainly I was focusing on one-on-one in-person interviews with founders. And the majority of founders will either be like from DeFi or infrastructure. At that time, trust me, I didn't want to make that specialization. It's just like naturally I interviewed a lot of like DeFi infrastructure founders. I also did other forms like weekly news aggregation or some fun content where I interview people on the street in New York, asking them how do they think about Web3. So really, I tried to have like a very diversified portfolio of the content. And then what I learned from interviewing those founders is really, I think they are all very smart and dedicated, but also stubborn in their own way, because they are so convicted in their own vision about their product, and as well as how their product gonna fit in DeFi or in the overall world. And one side, I was like really, really amazed by their like personality and commitment. On the other side, that also strengthens my thought of, oh, I really, really want to become one of them, right? Interviewing them, understanding them is the first step. But I think at that time, I know to become them, I really need to build something for myself.
Well, we're talking today because that's exactly what you did. You went on to found Native. And so before we talk a little bit about what Native is and how it works, again, let's do some time travel here. Take us back to when the original ideas, the seeds, if you will, of what Native eventually became. What were you thinking of at the time, and where did this idea come from?
Yeah. So that again comes back to the podcast. I still remember specifically, I did one podcast. It was specifically arguing about, okay, the different pricing models in the crypto space. You have order book, you have RFQ, and you have AMMs. And then it was around, okay, which pricing model works better for the traders? And the idea for Native actually naturally comes from the need in the crypto market, because the traders, they always want better pricing mechanism than what AMMs offers. All those like automated market makers, right? Users suffer from huge price slippage because the natural of AMMs, the pricing relies on X times Y equals K. So whenever there's a huge change of the token number inside the liquidity pool, naturally the pricing of that specific token will fluctuate a lot, and the user suffers from that. After I had that podcast and after I thought more about, oh, what do we really need? I thought, yes, maybe let's build an RFQ aggregator, RFQ system where we will allow protocols to get really, really easy access to liquidity, easy access to accurate pricing for different tokens. And that is really the origin of Native. But of course, over the time, Native's vision has been broadened, and I actually built several products, or I would say enhanced version of the original Native over time, based on what I collected from the market, or what was the feedback from the market.
Amazing. So let's go through then those three products. What is presently the product offering and vision of what you're working on at Native?
Sure. So as I said, originally the first Native product is, our slogan at that time is be your own DEX, because we want to allow any protocols and projects to have their own in-app DEX within 5 minutes. So we build this SDK where they can just copy and paste the HTML codes into their application directly. And then 5 minutes later, they will have an embedded widget where users can trade. And of course, where liquidity comes from is for all the liquidity that we aggregated, right? On the back end, we aggregated both AMM and PMM resources. AMM stands for automated market makers, such as Uniswap, PancakeSwap. And then PMM stands for professional market makers. So we do integrate it with a lot of leading market makers in the space to get their off-chain pricing. And then we will submit all the transactions on-chain. That was the first phase of the product. But then over the time, we do realize that actually not a lot of projects were trying to build their own DEX. Even though now I can say this like very confidently, but during the first several months, it was very, very hard to sell, right? I was trying to tell people, oh, look at StepN, how much revenue they generated from having their own DEX. But people are always having concerns about regulatory compliance, right? They will say, oh, what's the legal implication of having your own DEX? And then, but interestingly, I found a lot of solvers. They will call our API directly because all those solvers, they want to find the optimal pricing for different token pairs. And then the way they assess the liquidity source on chain is very fair, right? They will just compare all the pricing points from different APIs. And we got to use by top 3, or we started with one solver. It's actually them reaching out to us and say they will be using us, and then they wanted us to have like a higher RPS for them, meaning we don't limit their API costs. So at that time, I was like, okay, this is an interesting client use case. I'm going to dig into more. And then after that, I reached out to the majority of all the solvers in the market, including all the top 5 solvers on ConSwap and the top 5 solvers on 1inch Fusion. And till today, like all of them have been using us. All of solvers, they are super sensitive towards the pricing because of their small auto routing system, right? So I realized for us to be the middle layer of this, right? Connecting the different auto flows that all the solvers or aggregators are sending to us and match it with the liquidity source we have, being the middle layer in the long run, it will be a commodity service. Even though, we already established all the business connections, right? Or having aggregators, having solvers integrating us, yes, it takes a while. And we integrating with all the market makers, it takes persuasion, it takes partnership. But I think if you give any project like enough time, they will be able to build it over the long term. So how do we build our own moat in this industry? Then I thought about, okay, I think we need to have our own order flow, meaning we need to have our own users who can directly use the liquidity sources we aggregated. Then 2023, July, we launched our own DEX aggregator called NativeX. So now like retail users can go to nativex.finance directly to trade on NativeX. Since then, we have been accumulating retail users, and I think now daily, every day, we have like around 50K retail users trade on NativeX because the users did find the benefits of PMM pricing, where whenever a PMM liquidity source is utilized, they don't suffer from any slippage, right? Whatever they are quoted is what the actual token transaction they will get. That's the second product to get the order flow. And then, but after a while, like imagine we are already the liquidity source for all the major solvers and aggregators in the space, meaning we approximately have 70% to 80% of the access to all the DeFi order flows. We are still not settling a lot of volume compared to Uniswap, right? Daily, we were settling around 5 million to 15 million. It's still fairly small. And then I thought about myself, or I also look into all those order flow we get, right? So majority of the bigger transaction volumes are actually settled by Uniswap. And this is because the market makers, their pricing capability is limited by their own on-chain inventory. Meaning if they don't have enough inventory on that specific chain for that specific token, they wouldn't be able to settle it, right? Their pricing capability is unlimited because they can price whatever they want. But if they don't have that specific asset on chain, when you submit the transaction on chain, and the user will need to exchange the token, right? Token A to token B with the market maker. So they simply just couldn't do it. And especially when the market is very, very volatile, that means it's even harder for the market makers to have the inventory for those specific assets. That's actually one of the core reasons why AMM is always working, because it wouldn't stop holding at any time, right? As long as you have those assets inside the liquidity pools. So I thought to myself, how about we build a product that are going to help the market makers to solve the inventory issue, while on the other side, like we can actually help with the liquidity segmentation problem that we are always facing. That was the beginning of the third product, which is called Agua. And soon we will be uniting it under the same brand under Native. So it's not final confirm what I'm going to call it, but it will show us the lending and borrowing protocol. But essentially, Agua is enabling retail liquidity providers to provide liquidity to professional market makers to conduct on-chain credit-based trading. And in that way, the liquidity inside the Agua pool, inside the lending and borrowing of Native, its capital utilization rate is 100% boosted, meaning for a traditional lending and borrowing protocol, the maximum capital utilization rate is 100%. But that's almost impossible because you have the maximal LTV ratio, right? But for Agua, because of the credit-based trading feature that we are enabling with the market makers, easily the overall capital utilization rate could be at least 200% to 300%. And because of the super high capital utilization rate, then we were able to collect a lot of fees from the market makers. And then because of the actual usage of the liquidity, we are able to contribute all those real yields back to the liquidity providers. So those are the three products that we built so far. It's composing the unified liquidity layer, or the most capital efficient liquidity on all networks that we are building at Native. Native.org, the original RFQ routing system, is a fundamental trading infrastructure. NativeX give us the user order flow, while the new lending and borrowing protocol, Agua, it gives us the programmable liquidity, and it provides liquidity to the professional market makers. And together, you have both the supply and demand for the liquidity within Web3.
That's brilliant. And I appreciate you going through each one of those products. And if listeners want to learn more about Native, get to work using the product and see what's going on, what are the best ways for them to get started?
The best way is, of course, going to native.org, and then you can get into the docs. We have both a very comprehensive docs for liquidity providers, traders, and market makers. So for all those user percentiles, you can go into each section differently. And right now we are doing a revamping for the website. So soon all the information will be aggregated together. So either go to native.org for all the information, or you can follow us on Twitter, native_fi.
Let's talk about this experience with entrepreneurship then. Again, going back to your personal journey, you spent time at Bitly, then you became a consultant, and now you're an entrepreneur working in Web3. You've built something incredibly interesting over at Native. What was it like making that jump and becoming an entrepreneur?
I think the most different thing is you take responsibility. Okay, I'm not saying when you work at a consulting firm, you don't take responsibility. That's not what I meant. It's really meant you are taking larger responsibility every single day as you are growing the company, growing the team. Because before, when you work at consulting firms, right, it's because you're working for other people. And yes, you are following certain business objectives, but it's never the same thing as you're building from something from the ground up. And you are actually the main driver for that specific company, meaning I almost have feeling if I don't move things forward, nobody else will move things forward for me. This is how you usually feel. Entrepreneurship is really a lonely journey, I would say, right? When you work for a company, you have your mentors, you have your managers. They will hold you accountable. But when you build your own companies, okay, your investors will hold you accountable. But most of the daily lives, your investor wouldn't be on your back, say, oh, you're not doing this, you're not doing that. But invisibly, you will place this pressure onto yourself. You can slack one day, right? Not feeling bad. But after 1 week, if you are not seeing progress, I definitely feel the pressure to move forward, to change the things. That's, I think, like how it changed me is the perception of responsibility.
What are the 2 or 3 characteristics now that you've done this journey on your own that you think every entrepreneur should have? And I ask because I know listeners of the podcast have visions or ambitions of becoming an entrepreneur. What are the skills they need?
What you must have is, of course, you need to be very committed and driven and smart. That's kind of like your entry pass into the door. But after that, in the long run, it's really endurance, meaning there will always be ups and downs along the way you are building, and you will be always facing the problems. So keep yourself optimistic about the progress and keep finding the most efficient way to solve the problem. Work with the best people in the industry, try to find allies, and then go from there. That's really the core of this. And I think mental health is really, really important, to be honest.
When you think back to the origins of Native and getting started, and as you said, you started with an original vision and then it grew into this 3-product solution that seems very comprehensive to what the market needs in terms of supply and demand. But how has DeFi evolved since that time?
I will say the development of the 3 products was actually very specifically based on the market needs, right? The first product, when we first launched, we didn't receive the actual reaction I was expecting. Not a lot of people want to launch their own DEX. So the market gave us the feedback. Okay, there isn't enough product market fit there. So we say, okay, we cater a little bit more to the solvers who actually need like very competitive pricing. After that, like we started the DEX aggregator. I even asked the team, we interview a lot of retail users. What are they looking for when they want to trade DEX aggregators, right? And that time, I remember a lot of people, they were always APing meme coins. So, and then I will ask them, what are you looking for when you trade meme coins? They say, we're not necessarily looking for competitive pricing. Actually, we just want to buy the right meme coin, not the scammy one, and buy a lot. Can you offer that? And I thought about, our PMM pricing right now, at that time, like we can't do anything because usually market makers wouldn't have those inventories. But with the new product, we could, right? Liquidity providers can supply that. And then over the time, why did we pay attention to the liquidity segmentation is really because I think during the last year till the beginning of the year, you saw so many new layer 1s and layer 2s they are created in the space, right? And even today, right, people are talking about, launch your own app chain, right? You need your own app chain. But whenever I see that, I think it's great. People are innovating in terms of layer 2s. They are scaling Ethereum. They are providing like cheaper gas transaction costs. But your liquidity is actually segmented more when people need to use a new layer 1 or layer 2, right? You need to bridge your access to that. And how do you fundamentally solve the liquidity utilization or segregation issue? It's always remaining there. And I do believe that markets, they will always march to efficiency, and liquidity providers, it will always flow to the highest yield itself. So with that belief, that's how we created Agua. Is we want to solve the market efficiency problem and really trying to identify the opportunities whenever and if inefficiency happens, right? The partners who are utilizing the native's products, they are able to execute upon those inefficiency very, very quickly. So we want to serve as the fundamental financial platform for those. So it's really based on all the changing needs in the DeFi space that we created the 3 products. And I think like what's upcoming more is, okay, maybe I shouldn't say too much, but we are already like planning to expanding or adding additional features to our product, right? Because right now for the lending and borrowing, we haven't touched the cross-chain lending and borrowing part, but that's definitely our roadmap. And this again is trying to tackle the liquidity segmentation issue. So I would say it's always coming from the market's feedback, users' feedback, and then we build it.
What makes you optimistic about the future of DeFi?
I would say stick with the fundamentals, right? This is also the reason why I joined the crypto space. DeFi is always providing a more open and permissionless opportunity for the retail users, right? Maybe if you are in the United States or in like first world countries, you don't feel like a huge difference because usually like you can go to a bank easily. You give them your identification card. Usually you will get approved for like accounts or credit cards. But think about like third world countries. It's actually very, very hard for them to get access to a fairly decent financial products in that sense. With DeFi being so easy to create like a wallet to get access to lending and borrowing protocols, or even more advanced like financial instruments, educating the users, it is very meaningful for those less developed financial markets in the regional sense. Another thing is we always say like you need to have your own custody of your own funds, right? I'm not saying any government will do anything, but the thinking of, okay, you deposit your funds into banks, the banks has possibility to be bankrupt. And this happened last year, 2 years ago, right? What a name job, but it is happening everywhere. So how can we really trust the banks in the long run? That remains a very, very strong question. And I think the fact that DeFi is giving us our own custody, it actually assures. I do think this is optional but at least you need to have the choice for the users. Yeah. And thirdly is transparency. Not everything is written on chain, but at least the core important things like settled transaction data, they're all on chain and people cannot change it. So essentially, I think this gives retail users more assurance about where their funds are, how their funds are being used. I do think like people whoever work in Web3 is kind of envisioning for a very utopian financial markets in a sense. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I know we still are facing regulations, but as long as we are striving for the direction that's benefiting the retail users to getting a better holding and a better control their own assets, their own choices, then a net positive engagement to the overall society.
I want to ask you this question about the nature of Web3. If you look at most of the use cases, a lot of the data, a lot of the activity in the industry, it's mostly DeFi related. And so this question of, is Web3 ultimately just a DeFi industry, or was Web3 born to kind of serve this DeFi vision? Or is it much bigger than that? And it's just the case that DeFi is sort of that first product market fit segment of this industry.
Okay, to answer this question, first of all, I think it definitely has its bigger vision, right? You see AI, DeepIn, you see SocialFi, and then there are also more gamified projects in the space. The reason why DeFi was widely adopted is because, yes, we find the fundamental product market fit, right? People are using tokens to do a more fairly fundraise for their projects. They want to sell their like company shares via tokens, whatever it is, right? So naturally, it's an easier way for people to democratize the management of that company. So you have DAO. But I think why people love the Web3 industry, we need the fundamental financial instruments to support the economy. But the bigger picture is it's a culture. we always talk about consensus, right? What is the consensus? It's actually the culture, the common beliefs we have for the financial world. What do we envision to be a fair financial world for the founders, for the retail users, for the investors, liquidity providers? It's essentially everybody is contributing to this culture forming that makes how unique Web3 is. It's a very, very new economy. It's a very new industry, but because we are aiming for the transparency, we are aiming for a more fairer share of the participation from different parties. So naturally, you are creating like newer forms of products to democratize different things. It's not only like democratizing the financial markets, but also think about NFTs. Like traditionally, artists, right, when they work with art galleries, their maximum payout will be 50%. But usually when you launch an NFT, artists, at least they will get 80%. It's more like a direct revenue for them. And they also have the ownership, the royalty province, whatever. And for Web2, I know this has been talked a lot, but Web2 usually people talk about, you get to create your data. But Web3 is about the ownership of your data. Think about Instagram, right? How are people monetizing on Instagram? All those creators, they post the content, but the actual monetization of their influence is not through the assets itself. It's through they always need to open a shop or link to some referral things and they get paid, right? But in Web3, whatever the content you post, you own, you can actually monetize it. You can tokenize it. Of course, not everything needs to be tokenized, but the option of doing so on every single thing actually creates more possibility. So I'm just more thinking about from the broad perspective, Web3 creates this powerful tool and fundamental infrastructure for project founders, investors, artists to be creative in terms of whatever they're creating, the product, the artwork, and monetize it. And that's meaningful. And you don't know what could be created from that.
It's a great answer. Thank you for that. So I only have one final question for you before I ask you the GRTiQ 10. This final question is going back to your personal story a little bit here, but clearly your parents were influential in shaping your career. They cautioned you against studying abroad. Finally, you came to America and you wanted to study a PhD and they cautioned you against this. And now here you are, you're an entrepreneur working in DeFi, in crypto. So what do your parents make of your story now and what's happened to their daughter?
Okay, I feel like when my parents listen to this podcast, they will call me. Why did you say that? Actually, at the very beginning, again, they were against this. They were like, you had a very wonderful career in data science, competitive salary, and not very crazy work schedule or traveling schedule even, because I was mainly working for financial services. They're all around New York City. So even as a consultant, you don't need to travel a lot. And then they say, I don't even know what this Web3 is. Is it like criminal? But after a while, right, I tried to explain what I'm really doing. And I think they can really see from the way I'm communicating with them or handling different things have matured in a sense over time. So they see the positive changes from me. And after a while, they say, okay, we will be fully supportive in terms of this, but we want you to know that like you shouldn't feel feared or anything. If you want to go fully in the entrepreneurship route, then you should commit 100% into this, right? Don't back up. And if you need like financial security, we'll always be on your back. So this is actually like a very moving transition from my parents' attitude towards my entrepreneurship journey. And now even like from time to time, every week, my parents will text me. They will be like, how's your business going? Do you need to talk? And then they always try to be more active in terms of giving me advice. I really appreciate the change. I know they caution me a lot, but it's over the time I do realize that most of their cautions has their own meanings, right? It's based on their life experience, based on what they have experienced. And me as a new generation, I grew up in a different environment. I have my own unique experience. But if I mix all those things together, I might be able to form a fuller picture of that. And it actually helped me to understand people from different generations, right? Because I not only need to engage with the same generation as me, but also sometimes when I talk to investors, when I talk to clients, they might be from my parents' generation. So I can actually relate better. I'm really thankful to my parents, to my family. And it's because of all of those negotiating, all those arguments, whatever it is, that's how I have become today.
I appreciate you sharing that. And it's an amazing story. And I really appreciate you coming on the podcast and sharing it with us. I do want to ask you the GRTiQ 10. These are 10 questions I ask each guest of the podcast every week. And I think it just gives people an opportunity to learn more about you personally. But I always hope that listeners can learn something new, try something different, or achieve more in their own life. And so, Meina, are you ready for the GRTiQ 10?
Yes.
The GRTiQ 10. This is the way.
10 questions for astronauts floating in space.
What book or article has had the most impact on your life?
I would say Analects of Confucius, because we used to recite the whole book during the high school in the morning. It's basically like what Confucius said to his students. It talks a lot about integrity and a sincerity of like being a good human being. I know a lot of the things they talk about, all the things are kind of passive if you think of from like an entrepreneurial perspective, but I think that really formed the foundation of how I see the social relationship, or at least how I want to establish my connection with different people.
And how about this one? Is there a movie or a TV show that you recommend everybody should watch?
Yeah, my favorite movie will be Shawshank Redemption. It's a very old movie. I was really inspired by the main character, Andy, right? I think he strives a lot to save other people. There's a saying, it's like, it takes a strong man to save himself, but it takes a great man to save another. So I think if from my whole life, I can contribute to other people's life, contribute or inspire other people in a certain positive way, that would be great. And that's what I'm striving for.
Meina, if you could only listen to one music album for the rest of your life, which one would you choose?
Oh, I really like the band Cigarette After Sex. They have an album called Cry. Okay, this sounds very sad, but it's actually very relaxing, so try it out.
What's the best advice someone's ever given to you?
I thought about this. I think the one that I remember the most is be yourself, right? Especially, I think for a young entrepreneur like me, or let's say I'm a female, usually, even though I feel confident about a lot of decisions or the moves I make, but you still face all those different opinions or judgment, or you collect all information around you. But at the end of the day, and even though you are concerned about how other people perceive you, you still need to be yourself. And that's the strongest that you can become, because it's actually who you are that will help people to understand you more. And once you show the true self to the world and they can see your true passion, then you will be able to work through any difficulties you have.
What's one thing you've learned in your life that you don't think most other people have learned or know quite yet?
I think it's importance of respect. A lot of times, especially for being like an entrepreneur, you have to be aggressive in a lot of ways, right? You talk to your partners, you try to move things forward. But still, I think you need to respect the team's decision, you need to respect your partners, and even respect the investors. And it's then beyond that is respect for your family, right? Respect to your loved ones, whoever is very close to you. It's very easy for you to get lost in the daily like craziness, so that like you because you feel very comfortable with someone, then you let your emotions out. But I think to some extent, we should always remember to respect, and that will help to build the fundamentals of a lot of things. And that actually helps me to establish not only the boundaries, but also helps with the connections with different parties.
And how about this one? What's the best life hack you've discovered for yourself?
Mine is not a very serious life hack. It's more because like we are working Web3. So most of my friends or the people I talk to every day is Web3. And then sometimes you get tired of talking about Web3 after you spend 99% of your time talking about it. So whenever I meet with someone new, or like, let's say, talk to someone new, I try to make the conversation more interesting. I would just make up my occupation. I would say randomly, I'm a teacher, I'm an actress. And I don't think it's a life hack, but it's more like something I have been doing recently. And it has been pretty interesting to me.
I love that. So how about this one, Meina? Based on your own life experience and observations, what's the one habit or characteristic that you think best explains how people find success in life?
I think, for my opinion, it wouldn't be necessarily success. It's more essentially find happiness or balance with oneself. Is you need to do expectation management, right? Because people usually have desires, but also you have what you achieved so far. And if your desire versus what you achieved so far is not matched, then you are likely to be not happy with what you have, right? So I think it's always important for someone to manage the expectations, but not saying, oh, they shouldn't dream bigger. But it's just when you strive for something, you should know there's possibility, like you can be successful or not successful. And if you manage those very, very well, it actually helps you to iterate over the process, right? You can always adjust your expectation over the way. And then after you finding the inner balance, it actually helps you to sustain the growth in the long run.
And then the final three questions, Meina, are complete the sentence type questions. So the first one is, the thing that most excites me about Web3 is?
The people.
And how about this one? If you're on X, formerly Twitter, then you should be following?
Gort. He is the funniest guy I have ever seen. Very funny, but also very technical. He actually understands all the most recent like technology very well, and he has real humor, meaning he is actually able to say those concepts in a very basic but funny way. I want to become Word.
And the last one, I'm happiest when?
I realize I understand myself a little bit better.
The GRTiQ 10.
And I show you how deep the podcast.
Meina, thank you so much for coming on the GRTiQ podcast and sharing your story and all the amazing things you're working on at Native. I'll put a bunch of links in the show notes for anybody that wants to click and learn more about the team and what you're building. If listeners want to stay in touch with you, follow the things you're working on, what's the best way for them to stay in touch?
Again, go to native.org for our most updated company website. You can also follow us on Twitter, native_FI. Or you can follow my personal Twitter, CryptoMeina. I think it's just CryptoMeina. There's no underscore or hyphen. And I look forward to talk to each single one of you guys. And my DM is always open.
This has been a production of the GRTiQ podcast. For more information, including detailed show notes, visit grtiq.com/podcast. That's grtiq.com/podcast.
Please consider contributing to this project and helping build the community by subscribing and leaving a review. GRTiQ Podcast.